Hi guys, and welcome to the podcast. I am, of course, your host and podcast founder, Lawrence Francis. I just want to take this opportunity to give you a quick overview of this series, which features coverage of the Dublin Wine and Cheese Festival, which took place at Iveagh Gardens in central Dublin between the 8th and the 11th of August 2019, which will air on the Interpreting Wine podcast between episodes 289 and episode 300. This will feature a mixture of talks and one-to-one interviews with some of the leading lights in the Irish and international wine scene. This consumer fair is now in its second year, and I was seriously impressed with the quality of speaker overall. I think that events of this type really lend themselves well to being covered for the podcast, and would love to feature more events of this kind in the future. So without further ado, here is today's episode of the Dublin Wine and Cheese Festival 2019 series. Today's episode of the podcast features Claire Gallagher of Green Man Wines and her talk delivered at the festival entitled Orange is the New Black. In this talk, Claire illustrates the various styles of orange wine that are available in the market, both describing the production methods and, of course, tasting them. And I think given the choices of wines here, shows just how varied this wine style really can be. Enjoy.
Has anyone heard of orange wines before? Yeah? Tasted them? No? Okay, good. A lot of people haven't. What's your perception of them? They're orange. That's a good start. So what they are, and you're right, they are orange. They can vary in colour from very kind of pale orange right through to very, very deep amber, almost brown in colour. And the reason for that is that they are effectively skin contact white wines. That's all they are. But it's a very interesting, a very old process. A very old technique that was used, and it's been proven that in parts of Georgia and Armenia, actually Mary's from Georgia, a very old technique that has been 8,000 years continuously in use almost. And really only the term orange wines has come into use in the last kind of 9-10 years. It was rediscovered, popularized by American sommeliers, and thankfully we have a good few of these available in the Irish market now, which is absolutely wonderful. So we are starting off with a wine from Slovenia, from Western Slovenia. And the reason why I chose to show this was twofold. One, that it gets a short amount of skin contact. It only gets about 4 to 5 days. So you don't get all those flavours, and we'll go through the flavours as we taste them. You don't get all the flavours that you would associate with orange wines. You just get a little hint of it without it being too over the top. And the second reason, the second reason is because this technique was almost lost. When Georgia really disappeared behind the Iron Curtain, the Russians really didn't want anyone to be making wines that they hadn't really sanctioned. So the tradition pretty much just survived in people's homes, and they would have been made in what are called quevri. So quevri are very large clay vessels. They're kind of egg-shaped, and they're sunk into the ground. I don't know if you've ever seen a quevri before, or an amphora, if you can picture what it's like. But they're beautiful vessels, and actually the making of them has been passed by the UNESCO World Heritage, an intangible cultural heritage, and they're amazing. And the Georgians very much see these quevri or amphorae as being almost like womb-like. They have a real idea of wine as being a real sacred beverage. Anyway, this tradition pretty much survived for people drinking for their own families. And there was a man I visited him about 4 weeks ago in the very northwesternmost part of Italy, in Friuli, Venezia Giulia, called Josko Gravner. And Josko Gravner is originally a Slovenian. When the borders were redrawn after World War II, Josko's family found himself on the Italian side of the Slovenian border, but he still has his grandmother's house in Slovenia. So we also visited this estate, or we didn't visit this estate, but we visited the Vipava Valley, which is in the Slovenian side. And Josko Gravner visited Georgia in the early 2000s after he went on a tour of California. He tasted thousands of wines. And what he realized, he'd been really iconic in Italy as really popularizing white wines in Italy for international export. And he went to California, tasted about 1,000 wines, and he said, you know what, my wines taste exactly like the wines in California do. There's nothing different, there's nothing unique. And he went back to the tradition that his grandfather had used, which was making these white wines with skin contact. This pretty much kick-started the whole tradition again. So Josko Gravner is a name. The wines are expensive. I would have loved to have showed one today, but the wines are really quite expensive. They're 80, 90 euros a bottle. But if you can seek them out, definitely do. Try them at some stage. So anyway, the Vipava Valley in Slovenia is very, very close by. It's about 20 minutes drive from the Italian city of Gorizia. And we did this at an orange wines tasting probably about 2 months ago, and I was absolutely blown away by it because it really is a lovely, approachable style. So the grape varieties used in it are all indigenous to that northeastern part of Italy or the Slovenian side and Croatia as well. So the grape variety called Zelen, which you've probably never heard of before, I can imagine I hadn't, or barely had heard of it. Rebula, which is a very famous grape variety in northern Italy, and Malvasia, which again is very, I have some, thanks Mary. So, as I said, this gets 4 to 5 days with the skins, and you can see the colour. Look at the colour, it's barely orange, it's just a lovely kind of golden kind of colour. So what you get in terms of the Malvasia comes through as a lovely kind of a grapey, kind of lovely freshness, but the Rebula you find on the palate, which is kind of much bigger, kind of really quite rich actually. So have a bit of a swirl. So what you can expect from a white wine that's had a little bit of skin contact is slightly kind of nutty flavours, maybe herbal flavours. And because this hasn't much time in the skins, you actually get that lovely kind of Malvasia, kind of fruitiness, grapiness coming through as well. What do you think of it? Really nice, yeah. And I love this actually. When I did it, we did a masterclass. Actually, there's a book. Check it out if you come across it, called Amber Revolution. It's been released about a year now by a guy called Simon Wolf. And it's a superb history of orange wines. It's really, really, it's a beautiful read actually. So anyway, this was the first wine we tasted in the masterclass with him, and I just thought it was a really fantastic introduction to the whole style. Really nice to drink with cheese as well. You get that lovely kind of peachiness as well as a slight nuttiness as well. That would retail for around about 30 euros. It gets a little bit of time in really large neutral barrels as well. So you don't get a large oak influence. You just get this lovely kind of creaminess and lovely kind of savoury undertow. Do you find it quite savoury actually? Yeah, I do. And there's a really nice minerality as well in the finish. Just keeps it really, really clean and very, very fresh. Okay. Anybody any questions? Is it quite what? Really nutty, yes. Yeah. Very much so. And that's what you'd expect. You get that lovely kind of nutty character. So this is from Slovenia. Yeah, so from the westernmost part of Slovenia. And actually, it's a really interesting, the Vipava Valley. So if you ever go to that part of Italy or Slovenia, there's a beautiful river that runs down through that part of Slovenia, which is called the Soča River, which becomes the Isonzo in Italy. And there's valleys. You can see the Dolomites in the background, really, really beautiful. And you have just lovely kind of verdant valleys which run. So the Vipava Valley runs from the Italian border, from the town of Gorizia, kind of east to west. And they're kind of low hills at the foothills of the Alps. Really beautiful part of the world, actually. And in fact, it was interesting because in Amber Revolution, in the book, Simon Wolf talks about a priest in the mid-1800s in Vipava, in this valley. It was only a small valley, who reintroduced these techniques. He was talking about these techniques of which are really ancient in that part of Italy, of fermenting white wines with their skins. And one of the reasons for that is the grape variety that we're tasting here, which is Rebula, which was known as Ribola in Italy. And it's got really, really thick skins, and it oxidizes really, really easily. And one of the reasons why it needed to be skin contact is because the presses they had in those times, very, very poor part of the world, they literally couldn't press the skins to break them. And it was a really good way of preserving the wines as well when they didn't have temperature control or anything like that, or any kind of modern technology or chemistry to aid them in making the wines. So, yeah. Okay. And yes, the flavours you get from the skin. So yeah, that's a really good point actually, because when you look at a grape, a white grape or a red grape, and if you tear a little bit of the skin off and put it on a piece of white paper, you'll see that the colour bleeds onto the paper, and so the skins are wonderful. They're full of colour, they're full of tannins, they're full of really interesting antioxidants, lots of flavour, and all those antioxidants and flavours, they help preserve the wine. So if you're making a white wine in a warm part of the world and you don't have temperature control, that's a fantastic way of actually preserving those white wines. I think so. Yeah, you can. From the stems. From the pips, very much so. The slight bitterness, yeah, and I like that. It's just this little kind of bitter kind of twist at the end, which is really nice. Makes them really drinkable. And actually, when I alluded to the term orange wines becoming really, really popular again in the last kind of 10 years, or actually being coined in the last 10 years. So one of the reasons why they're so popular now is because sommeliers realised how fantastic they are with pairing for pairing with food. So you can drink those right through the entire meal. Particularly these kind of lighter styles, and you can graduate to kind of more heavier styles, which we will do in the tasting actually. And they complement everything from kind of starters, fish dishes, cheeses, meats, all those. You can really, really kind of very versatile kind of wines. Okay, shall we taste the next one? I think you're all done. Okay, so the next wine that we're showing is from Spain, from a part of Spain which is very close to Barcelona, and it's an area called Priorat. Have you come across Priorat wines before? So they're really known, particularly in the 80s, 90s and 2000s, as being the home to really big, full-bodied, particularly red wines. It's a very kind of mountainous area. These are grown at around about 400 to 600 metres above sea level. And the kind of style of wines is slowly changing. It's changing away from a very international, very full-bodied, very, very rich style to a much more elegant and kind of nuanced style. The guy who owns this is called Dominic Huber, and when he came to Priorat, he said this is an incredibly diverse area in terms of different soils and different microclimates, and what he wanted to do was to make wines in what's called a Burgundian style. So make wines that are a bit lighter, still very intense, lots of intensity, lots of flavour, but lighter, fresher, more acidity, and just much more food friendly. That's really what he wanted to do, was make really food friendly wines. So he makes red wines, and he also makes this, which again I tasted at a masterclass recently, and I was absolutely blown away by it. And if you ever get a chance to find his wines, try them. They're wonderful. They're not cheap, but they're really special. So this is a blend of two aromatic grape varieties which are used in sherry production pretty much. This is 90% Pedro Ximénez and 10% of Muscat of Alexandria. So both aromatic grape varieties, but in this case not allowed to stay sweet, fermented fully out to dryness. So this gets about the Muscat part of it, so only 10% of it gets 10 days on the skins. So you only get the slightest little kind of hint of skin contact, and then the rest of it is fermented normally. And what they do is they control the temperature a little bit, not too much. They start the fermentation. But I should say as well, all these are kind of totally natural. There's no laboratory yeasts. All the viticulture is either organic or biodynamic. So they're able to do the minimum possible intervention in them. This is just really kind of herbal. Mary, could I try a little bit actually? Thank you. Oh, have we? No way. Thanks a million.
None left for the speaker.
Yeah. Thank you. So again, you can see the colour is really kind of golden. It's not terribly dark, but we're moving up the kind of colour grades here. And the nose, you get that slightly sherried, slightly oxidative kind of style, nutty, as this lady was saying, which is really nice. I find it really herbal and really saline, actually. So the Pedro Ximenez grows on clay, and the Muscat grows on slate. So the slate gives it incredible kind of minerality. And this, as you open it up, this ideally should be drunk in a big glass. This is not the ideal glasses to get all the aromas, but certainly you get some idea of it. But leave this in the glass for 10 minutes or 20 minutes and you'll see it changing all the time. And that's what I love about these wines, actually. They change and evolve in the glass. They're really fascinating. So this, it's a wee bit close at the moment. You're not getting a huge amount of aromas from it, but that will change if you can kind of swirl it around a little bit. But I really find it really saline. You almost get this sense of kind of ozone and kind of like salty kind of character to it. I think this would be amazing with maybe a handful of either salted almonds or some really good Parma ham or something like this. I just think it would be stunning with it. So fermented completely out to dryness. This is bone dry. Really, really fresh, lovely minerality. And a great finish on it as well. Really, really long, really complex. And this as well is really nice to show because it's quite young at the moment. So again, hence it's not showing you much on the nose. I would say probably 3 to 5 years for this, and this will be incredible. How do you find it? It is really dry, isn't it? Yeah. Yes. That's a good question. Actually, I think the vines are about 20 to 30 years old, so it's probably, it must have been there already. They must have been in situ already.
It's a long way from Jerez.
It is a long way from Jerez. Yeah. Okay, lovely. Will you try the next one? You like that? Good. Anything you'd like to pair this with? Is there anything that springs to mind? Oh yeah, delicious. Yeah, really, really good. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so this next wine is from Italy. It's made by a man called Giulio Armani, and he is the winemaker for a very famous estate called La Stoppa. And La Stoppa is run by a lady called Elena Pantaleoni. And there's a documentary which was produced probably about 5-6 years ago called Natural Resistance, and it was about the emergence of natural winemaking in Italy. So it took 4 different wine growers. Elena Pantaleoni was one. Actually, she was here in Ireland last year or the year before, and we took her on a bit of a tour of everywhere. She totally fell in love with Ireland. We took her to Trinity College Cellars. She tried all sorts of incredible wines from there. We took her to Cork. She absolutely loved it. So she was raving about Ireland whenever she went back to Italy, which was really nice. So Elena is known, and Giulio Armani, so he's her winemaker, and they're known as being kind of really artisanal winemakers. They're not really interested in the natural wine label. What they want to make is really authentic, really, really interesting wines from their estate in Emilia-Romagna. So Emilia-Romagna is in the central part of Italy, northern central part, and where they are is close to the town of Piacenza, which kind of close, as you're heading towards Milan. So it's funny because you think in that part of Italy it's not as hot as it is, but in that part of Italy it can get as hot as Sicily during the summer. And that's one of the reasons why they make orange wine, because again, this idea of being able to preserve the wine without temperature controls is very, very important in really hot parts of the world, including that part of Italy. So this cuvée is called Dinavolino. And it is from vineyards probably about 250 to 350 meters in altitude, in the completely landlocked, kind of in the foothills of the Apennines. And what Giulio does with this is harvests quite late, gives us about 4 months in the skin. So if you think back, the first two wines were 4 to 5 days, then 10 days, and now we move to 4 months in the skins. And you can see the difference that makes on colour. It's really much deeper. This is really kind of golden orange colour now. And really much more smoky, much more savoury, very, very different kind of taste and flavour profile. What do you think of it? It's different.
I've heard the one before.
Yes, totally, and that's why I love to show these two wines first, because they give you a little bit of a hint of what orange wines are about without shocking your palate. Because this is a paradigm shift. This is completely, these are completely different wines. Actually, I remember the first time I tried one. I was at a wine fair in London, and I tasted a Pinot Grigio, which is called Pinot Grigio Ramato, and Ramato kind of means copper colours. And it was because Pinot Grigio actually has quite dark skins. It's got a lot of colour in the skins, and I was blown away by it. I was like, "What the heck is this?" It's so much darker, really kind of rich flavours, lots going on, and it was nothing like the Pinot Grigio we're used with at all. So this has, I'll have a little bit, please, Mari. Oh, sorry.
What does this retail at?
So this retails around about 25. Yeah. So actually, it's almost like a savoury, kind of cheesy kind of smell. Do you pick that up? It's kind of like a savoury smell, really kind of almost like cheesy. It smells like gravy almost in some ways, or kind of chicken broth. And I should say, these style of wines, you talk to any winemaker, orange winemaker in Italy or Spain or France, they cannot keep enough of these in stock. They could virtually sell everything to Japan and Korea. And the one reason for that is because all these flavours are really umami flavours. That kind of savouriness, that's umami. That's the kind of flavour you're getting. And it works incredibly well with tataki tuna or sushis or miso, any of those kind of flavors. It works incredibly well with. So it really is, it's just a question of going, this is not a white wine, this is a totally different category. And it's brilliant because we're starting to see them in really good sommelier-led wine lists now here in Ireland. There's a few places, and they have a separate section. So instead of the old kind of like reds, whites, rosés, we're now getting reds, whites, whites, rosés, oranges and reds. And these are effectively, that's what they are. They're kind of white wines made like red wines. So they have these skin contact with them. So what do you think of it? Would you drink this? Would you have a glass of this in a restaurant? Depends, I guess. You're right. Yeah. 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 For sure. Yeah. Brilliant. For sure. And actually, I should mention the grapes used for this. So they're local grapes. They are, again, I've got brain freeze. Sorry. Oh yeah, so Malvasia. So we come across Malvasia again, but this is a slightly different Malvasia. The first one we tried in the Slovenian one was Malvasia from Croatia. This is a different one called Malvasia di Candia, which you find a lot in the Canary Islands actually, and in this part of Italy. And that's blended with a local grape variety called Ortrugo, which is completely obscure. And then Marsanne, which funny enough grows in that part of Italy. So Marsanne you kind of find much more in the Rhone Valley, which makes kind of great white hermitage vines. So so really different, I think. Lovely. And then we'll go on to our last one. Okay, thanks, Mari. Okay, so the last one that we're trying is from Georgia itself, and I really wanted to show you a Georgian wine because I think Georgian wine is so integral to this whole story. It's a country that I'd really love to visit, and it's definitely on my bucket list. So Mary, I'll be asking for your advice when I eventually make it there. So this, and the other reason why I wanted to show this is because it's made by a guy called Iago Bitarishvili, and he's the epicenter of orange wines that have been exported out of Georgia. And Mary was saying to me earlier, actually, she was there last month. You can't actually find this in Georgia. He sells everything export. And it was him who influenced a whole wave of winemakers to try to basically bring these amber skin contact, Cuevri fermented or amphora fermented wines out of their homes and start making them. And he encountered a lot of resistance from his dad. His dad was like, "Why are you doing this, Iago? This does not make sense." And he said, "No, it's what I want to do. This is our tradition, and we really have to preserve it." And that's what he did. And as a consequence, he really is the epicenter of all the kind of new wave winemakers coming out of Georgia. So the grape variety here is Chinuri, which is one of over 500 indigenous grape varieties in Georgia, which are grown. So it's wonderful because you're trying all these things which you've never even heard of before. I hadn't heard of Chinuri prior to 2 years ago. There's another lovely orange grape variety or wine that's made with skin contact called Rakatsiteli, so well worth checking out. And a winery called Pheasant's Tears, so well worth checking out as well. So this gets 6 months in the skin. So what happens here is that the grapes are picked. They're given a very light kind of crush, broken up, and put straight into the Cuevri. So the Cuevri are sunk into the ground. You'll find kind of gravel around them, and everything just very slowly ferments in that. The skin stay in contact for that 6 months. So the colour is deep, but it's not actually as deep as the previous one, the Dinavolino, despite longer skin contact. And again, at a fairly recent tasting, I loved this. I thought it was absolutely gorgeous. It smells so different. Yeah, it does actually. Yeah. Smells like elderflower. Yeah. And it's a grape variety that has all these lovely kind of citrusy elderflower kind of characters, which is really, really nice actually. And this is bone dry, absolutely bone dry. Again, really, really good with food. Great acidity, great length on it. Really interesting. What do you guys think of it? Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and it really does. They're intriguing wines. They really engage you. They're lovely to drink just on a purely enjoyable level, but they really engage your brain as well. They really kind of make you think, what am I tasting here? Why is that? All these kind of questions, which I think make them really, really interesting to drink. So do you think you'd order a glass in a restaurant if you came across an orange wine? Maybe. So you can eat it with any kind of food, really. The tradition in Georgia is actually to drink this throughout the entire meal. Either, yeah. I think depending on the orange one. I think with the Iago's one, you could drink this with fish. I think it was particularly with a richer fish. You could drink it with meat, no problem. Cheeses, I think they're wonderful accompaniments, or kind of vegetarian dishes as well. They're really versatile, which is what makes them nice. So, you're welcome. Apple pie. That's a lovely idea. Yeah. So happily. It's a great idea. I love that. It's great. Good to do that. So guys, that's the end of the tasting. I'm around if you want to ask me any questions or ask any questions about any of the wines. So, and thank you. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much to Claire for giving a fantastic talk. which I think touched on some really interesting orange wine styles. Do be sure to check out Green Man Wine's website and main social media handles, which are below. And while you're on social, why not give me a follow? I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, at Wine Podcast on Twitter, or email me hello@interpretingwine.com. The next episode of this special series, episode 291, will feature the first of my one-to-one interviews recorded at the Dublin Wine and Cheese Festival, when I sat down for a chat with Lynn Coyle, MW. See you then.